As usual, I am caffeinated before this video, and that is because I require this energy to get into the stuff we're about to talk about, because as usual with update videos, you know, there's really interesting stuff to talk about, but today, damn, is there some interesting stuff to talk about. Let's get into this, guys. What is up, Bat Family? Thank you so much for joining me again on today's video. I really appreciate you checking out my content. Today, we've got a lot to talk about, and I know I always say that, but genuinely, I feel like the kind of content that we're going to cover in this video, leading into the Batman now not so far away, is some really, really interesting tidbits. I do want to say right off the bat that you can watch certain parts of this video for those who are kind of avoiding extra content, but when I do get into maybe some stuff that I wouldn't say is spoilers, but it's like the kind of level of stuff that people might not want to get into because they might feel like it's getting into too much of the movie, I will issue a spoiler warning for something like that, because I know some people still want to watch some of this content but might not want to get into some of the details I talk about, which is fair enough. But today, guys, there's Matt Reeves talking about Mr. Freeze talk. There's Matt Reeves talking about frickin' Robin talk. We've also got another scene from the Batman, and we're going to get into that kind of talk. And then there's Joker talk, believe it or not. And then there's Bat Symbol talk. There's just a lot of, I guess you could say, Boba talks. Yes, I am very fully self-aware of the cringe. So before we crack on, guys, would really appreciate a like on this video. If you don't know how helpful that is, it basically pushes me a little bit more into the algorithm. We are closing in on 100,000 subscribers, a goal that's been, you know, going for a long time on this channel. So if you share this video with your friends, or even if you're not subscribed and you've been checking me out for a while, I would really appreciate your subscription today if you feel like I have earned it. That would be awesome. It would be amazing to hit 100k around the time of March, which is obviously the release of the Batman, so it's like the stars are aligned, but you know, we're gonna have to wait and see. But again, thank you for your support. But first of all, before we get onto the Entertainment Weekly coverage, all of the new photos we've got, there's stuff I'm even forgetting to mention that we're about to get into. Let's also first get into the Batman escapes the GCPD scene. Now, if you don't know about this, this is maybe something you might not want to watch. It's nothing massively spoilery, because practically we've seen a lot of this even from the first DC Fandom trailer. It just gives you yet again another impression of the movie, just like the funeral scene, like how it's shot, the score in the background, how Matt Reeves decided to do whatever, the dynamic between Jim Gordon and Batman here. But again, if you still do not want to know what even that's like until your first experience, by all means, skip forward to a certain timestamp in this video. This did come out of the Jimmy Kimmel show when he interviewed Robert Pattinson, as they usually do. They show a little teaser, so I'm going to be reacting to it. I have seen it, but I'm just going to give my reaction to it somewhat again fresh. I've only seen it once or twice, so like I'm still going to fanboy out about this, and I know there's a lot of people struggling to make out the dialogue, so I'm going to get into exactly what is happening in this scene, and I have like 99.9% confidence as to why what happens in this scene happens.
Who's the mustache with the broken nose?
I love that voice! The voice!
It's Kinsey Narcotics.
Kinsey
One of the guys I got into it with at the Iceberg Lounge. What are you saying? Kinsey moonlights with the Penguin. I moonlights just a cop.
Oh yeah, I love the score. Bum 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 bum. Oh, and he goes for it! There's lots of funny edits on this as well, like... I'll just shut up because I want to, you know... I love that. I love that. Like... Go, Batsy. Get out of there. Get your wingsuit deployed. Right, so... Basically... Let's start off what they're talking about. This is after probably the Iceberg Lounge, as Batman says, you know, he was one of the people I got into it with at the Iceberg Lounge. In the trailer, we know Batman goes there, sees Penguin, and the reason why he's saying, who's the mustache with the broken nose, is because, as he said, like, you know, I basically saw him at the Iceberg Lounge, one of the people I got into it with, and it's just like, okay, well, that's sus, you know, if he's a cop here, what was he doing there, hanging out with Penguin? As we know, when he means gets into it with, like, there's a bit of combat that goes down in the Iceberg Lounge because, you know, Penguin's guys would be defending the place from the Batman, I guess, to put it very plainly. So the thing is here, I find it very interesting that Gordon says it's Kenzie. He works in narcotics. Now, oh, what is Penguin and, you know, part of probably Falcone's criminal underworld enterprise slightly dabbling in? Probably a bit of street drug distribution, so having a cop who works in narcotics, you can put the pieces of the puzzle together yourself there, how handy that would be. By the way, just when we hear Pattinson say this, and I know some people might be like, how do you know that properly? It's like, we've heard his voice enough now. This is my favorite live-action Batman voice. It's not like the whole, where are the other drugs go? Or it's not necessarily like, Batfleck was really good. I like the voice modulator stuff, but in terms of just trying to do everything solely yourself, like with your own voice, not making it sound too cheesy or whatever, a bit more of a low voice / whisper, Pattinson, in my preference, personally, has hit the nail on the head for what my vision would be for the Batman as well. But anyway, after he says he's one of the guys I got into it with, after learning that, you know, Jim said that this cop is in narcotics, that's when Jim says, are you saying that Kenzie moonlights for the Penguin? And this is what some people couldn't make out because a bit of the low audio, I'm guessing, and the quality. But, you know, at the same time, Batman is kind of whisper talking. Batman kind of pauses, you know, looks at the dirty cop, so to speak, and he says, no, he moonlights as a cop. Now, moonlight kind of means basically he somewhat has a secondary job. Now, Jim is kind of asking, and it is kind of like the same thing at the end of the day, the same difference as they say. Like, Jim is asking, are you saying he moonlights for the Penguin? So in addition to being a cop, he kind of works for Penguin. And what Batman says, and I love this dialogue, is basically like, no, he moonlights as a cop, meaning that first and foremost, he works for Penguin, and the moonlighting situation is secondary somewhat. Job, if you will, is being a cop. So first and foremost, crook, thug, goon of Penguins, and he moonlights as a cop, rather than putting it the way Jim put it, saying he moonlights for Penguin. I love that, because ultimately, as I said, they're basically both agreeing and saying the same thing, but the way Batman puts it is like, no, through saying no, he moonlights as a cop is more like, no, his allegiance is to Penguin, and he just kind of is working here as a secondary thing. His loyalty and identity is as a thug. And I know it is kind of funny at the face value. Lots of people are like, wait, what? He punches Batman? With the way they're getting into it here, after whatever happens in this precinct, there's a lot of cops out there. We know there are a lot of corrupt cops who won't like Gordon working with Batman. Why? Because A, some people might not like that because it's unlawful, he's a vigilante, but most are probably on the payroll of Falcone, have been on the payroll of Maroni before Falcone, the Penguin, etc., etc. A perfect example is Kenzie from Narcotics here. So when you have the fact that maybe before this, by the way, what happens is that scene in the trailer where Batman kind of goes after that one cop, he could be going after Kenzie and Gordon stops him. That's why they go in this separate room here to have this conversation, because Batman's like, I need to have a word with you away from these other people. That's where Jim learns that Kenzie is working for Penguin, as Batman tells him, and with all the cops standing outside, if you're still following me here, they might be thinking, well, shit, like, if Jim's starting to realize this, because they probably know Jim's a bit of a good egg, they've been probably trying to corrupt him even more and more, but he's been resisting, but they haven't wanted to kill him as a result, so to speak. But now, after the fact that he's cottoned on to the fact, but thanks to Batman, that there is a lot more corruption, and I'm not saying that Jim isn't aware of corruption, by the way, but obviously he wasn't even aware of Kenzie working for Penguin, he might be in danger now. So the whole reason Batman punches him is because, and I love this, he's protecting Jim. Because in this moment, well, just think about it this way. Imagine if you're a crooked, bent cop outside of this room, seeing how close and sus Batman and Jim are looking in this moment, as if they're, like, Gordon is learning. They're even looking at them. And I imagine if you are the bent cop, you'd be thinking, crap, maybe I'm kind of getting exposed here. So to prevent them from maybe kicking the crap out of Gordon, possibly even killing him, because he might cause a little bit of a pain in the ass now, after learning this from Batman, Batman thinks, right, I'm going to punch Jim, deck him, to make it look like he's not working with me and hasn't realized all this stuff. And that's amazing to me, because Batman cares about Jim so much, and he still wants to maintain that relationship with him at the same time. So much so that he's willing to make the whole GCPD come after him and shoot him, which is insane. Now we finally know why the GCPD are firing at him. He didn't have to do this, but arguably Bruce Wayne, the Batman, knows that if he didn't do this, Jim might go back to the precinct, everyone would be acting normal, but later that night or the next day, Batman would get a call or be in the news that Lieutenant James Gordon was murdered. And obviously, it wouldn't be shown as cops murdering him, but it would have been cops that would have done that job, because they don't want someone like Jim on the inside who is a good egg versus all the people on the payroll. I'm not saying I'm spot on with that, but I can practically guarantee you that Batman punched Jim to protect his... It's all about the optics within the GCPD, so to speak. Oh, and by the way, even though I said earlier about going into another room, this is the same room. So what I'm guessing Batman, or should I say Jim, does is that after he struggles to go towards Kenzie or someone like that, maybe he clears the room so he can have a chat with Batman, but then they're all waiting outside afterwards, which is this scene. As I'm watching this again, I love seeing Batman run throughout the corridors of the precinct. That is just legendary, but you have masses and masses of cops running, like, you know, just, you can hear the crowd chatter here as they charge towards him. But I also love the amount of staircases there are in this precinct. It goes up and 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 up, and I'm guessing this leads to that wingsuit scene, because that's where he barely gets there in time to, you know, pull the cord, gets it on, and then that's when that cop in the trailer just about almost grabs the cape, but like he jumps off and glides away. I don't know how his relationship will be repaired after this, unless Jim has such influence that he can change that, but that remains to be seen, because at this point, how will Batman get that relationship with cops just not firing at him from this moment onwards, even if Jim does become commissioner? Unless he gets to a position of power, as I said, where he's like, well, no, the Batman is no longer. But then again, that just puts Jim in danger if he was ever to announce that, even if he was in a higher position than lieutenant. So what I'm trying to say is, maybe from this moment onwards, that's why Batman can't really be seen so much with your everyday cops and why they might fire at him. I'm not guaranteeing that, by the way, because it does look as though Matt Reeves does like the idea of having that kind of animated series vibe of Batman coming onto a crime scene where there are cops somewhat standing around sometimes. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is the beginning of the true fracture of generic cops not firing at the Batman. From this moment onwards, that might just be a thing, and Jim has to be a bit more low-key about meeting with this masked vigilante. So that's my breakdown on that, but now let's move on to the Entertainment Weekly stuff. We've got stuff to talk about with Mr. Freeze, Reeves's and Pattinson's thoughts on Robin and stuff, so this is, oh man, I love talking about this. But before we get into that, however, I do want to get into the photographs. There is some gorgeous shots, some that we've seen before, but like some extended stuff that isn't so much to break down considering the amount of discussion we've had on this channel with certain scenes seen in these photos, but again, just offers you a new perspective that maybe some of you just haven't seen, or maybe you have seen it but you wanted my takeaway on it. So image one is of Catwoman. I love this kind of like wider shot because we get another full body look at her and it looks fantastic. I can practically guarantee where this is. This is the location of where Batman, as seen in the first trailer, as what you're looking at on screen right now, is looking down at the Penguin doing some kind of business dealing, you could say. And as seen in other trailers, the Batmobile is there. He goes there with Selina, and it's to somewhat foil the operation. I'm thinking in this scene as well, if you put more pieces of the puzzle together from other trailers, this is where he says, like, you two really are quite a duet or whatever. We can see an umbrella there. Perhaps that even is Penguin himself. We get to see Selina's whip here. I just think she looks amazing. I know this is a proto Catwoman suit, and it is, you know, designed and based off the kind of foundation of a motorcycle-esque get-up, but I love it. You know, that's the whole point of this vision. Not everyone is where they're at right now, even including the main villain himself, the Riddler. And what I mean by where they're at right now, I mean to say where they're at traditionally, like Riddler being like that of his comic book counterpart. You know, they're still very early, even Batman himself in year 2, even though he is a bit further ahead in the costume department than Catwoman. But image number 2 is Gordon. Now, this kind of goes back to the scene we were just talking about. This, I believe, is right before with what I was saying when they were all within that room, and before Gordon clears them all out. This is where, as you see on screen in the first DC Fandom trailer, when Bruce is going towards whoever, possibly Kenzie, but it might not be Kenzie, by the way. I do want to chuck that out there because obviously Bruce/Batman in that clip says to Gordon, or asks him, should I say, who's the mustache with the broken nose? So maybe there was another cop that he knew about. In this point of the scene, when they're all in the room, Gordon pushes him up against a cage and is saying something to him like, you can't kind of do that or whatever. Who knows really what the dialogue is, but it's all a part of that sequence of events pertaining to the clip that we just saw. Up next is an image you may be familiar with. It's just the textless version of the cathedral scene photo that we've seen in many magazines now of Reeves directing Batman, or just Batman, Pattinson, but he is Batman. I just love this shot, just the filmmaking of it, just, you know, it speaks for itself. I don't need to ramble about that one, but I love this one. Oh my god. As you guys know, in a lot of promos, they've been showing, it's not different takes, by the way, it's expanded conversation in the interrogation scene of when Bruce, or should I say Batman, speaks to the Riddler in Arkham State Hospital, where he's caught, but there is still more of his plan. Some lines of dialogue from this scene is like, "You'll see," and things like that, because Bruce is asking, "What have you done?" And the earliest version of that we saw is the last line, when he shouts, "What have you done?" Because his like face is like scrunching up, boiling, and then the kettle and volcano just erupts, and he gets angry, right? But in other promos we have seen that it's not just different takes, as I said. He asks him it a few times, and clearly Riddler isn't answering, or he's kind of laughing, holding off the answer. But basically, Batman says, "What have you done?" And then he asks him again, "What have you done?" And then he asks him for a third time, and that's when the bald blood response comes out, and he screams, "What have you done?" And we know he punches the glass in that scene from the main trailer from a few months back. But in this photo, he's stood up. So after when he punches the glass in the main trailer, as you're seeing on screen, he gets even more angry and stands up. Riddler stands up. Maybe one of the cops, whoever, starts to think, okay, this is over now. That's why Riddler gets up, and as he's walking away from the interview room or whatever, it's just kind of that frustration-esque, end of this scene. But I love this shot of Batman here. Pattinson looks quintessential Batman. I don't know how anyone could disagree with that. Sure, you might have your different preferences on the type of Batman you want, but here, he looks so menacing, so angry. This is like a screenshot out of a graphic novel. I don't know, it's just so good. It is so good. I can't really ramble much more about this one. It's just what I said. It's an expansion of that scene of when he interviews Ed in Arkham State Hospital, and we get a little bit of a look at Ed here. But, in this moment, Ed, if you've read the prequel novel, if not, I recommend checking out my in-depth breakdown, but he likes the feeling of feeling powerful, even when he was younger, after the kind of ways he's been shat upon in his life. And in this moment, he must be feeling, not only does he have all the cards up his sleeve, but he feels so powerful in front of this masked vigilante, and this is going to be such an interesting scene to watch unfold. So now those photos are out the way, I want to get into some of the comments from some interviews. This won't be like a long interview talk like one of those other videos, but there are a few comments that I've discussed before on this channel when talking about sequel villains, popular fan casts, or not really fan casts, but ideas for a sequel villain. One of the most popular has been Mr. Freeze, so we will get into that. But quickly, there are some comments from Pattinson recently saying that the bat symbol is a usable symbol, but he says so himself that it is a tool which he can pop out of the chest plate. But they also talk about the grapple gun in this interview. I believe this one's from Entertainment Weekly as well. I think a lot of these are, but there are some from Collider as well, saying, not to mention, of course, no Batsuit would be complete without Batman's trademark grapple gun, which flips out from the suit's wrist. As we know, that's perfectly demonstrated when he's like going up against Penguin, or for example in the clip we just watched, it deploys out and he goes up. So Pattinson says that the grapple gun is, I think, in every single Batman movie, but I'm not sure how many times he used them so defensively as he does in The Batman, says Pattinson. It's used as a weapon, and that's quite a lot, which is quite fun. Again, it's very rudimentary. It's kind of based on Travis Bickle, the gun mechanism, which he has in Taxi Driver. So I love the idea and the comments here that it is being used as a weapon. So if that is true, and say what you will about Titans, but one of my favorite things is when we see in the Titans show when Robin is used his grapple gun to attach to people. And yes, we have seen this even, I believe, in the BVS warehouse fight scene, that he utilizes it in combat moves. So I can imagine, and this will be quite a brutal Batman if we see it done in this way, if he launches the hook out into someone's shoulder or in their back, which is non-lethal, to be fair, it won't kill them, and he drags them back into him, that is a fight scene I am dying to see when I go and see this movie. Okay, so this is where some of you may have skipped to this point to get to some of Matt Reeves' comments on sequel talk, and this is super interesting stuff, because I've always spoken on this channel about the possibility of how much will this get into fantastical side of things, like Clayface. And Mr. Freeze, I feel like, yes, I guess, the cryogenic aspect of all of that is fantastical, but I always felt like that was a lot more achievable, which is exactly what Matt Reeves gets into here. But this trilogy isn't going as tonally grounded as I guess you could say Nolan did, so it does have room for what we're about to talk about, but it might not be as eccentrically translated into this tonal adaptation of the Batman with, I do think that Clayface could still be done. As I've mentioned in my discussion series videos, by the way, if you're still waiting for that discussion series video, I will be doing it. I swear. I know I've been taking long with it, but that will be coming out. It's been so busy. I do apologize. I keep saying it will come out, but there will be discussion series video highlighting your Q&A comments. Don't worry about that. But let's just get on to the comments. So recently, Matt Reeves spoke with Collider and explained how he was drawn towards a more grounded interpretation of the comics. That isn't to say fantastical villains couldn't get involved though, especially one such as Mr. Freeze, of which he said the following. In my view, I just feel drawn to finding the grounded version of everything. So to me, it would be a challenge in an interesting way to try and figure out how that could happen. Even the idea of something like Mr. Freeze. That's such a great story, right? I think there's actually a grounded version of that story, which could be really powerful and could be really great. So I love the fantastical side of Batman, but this iteration, obviously, while being, to me, I think it is very comics faithful, but I don't think that this one is necessarily, it doesn't lean as hard into the fantastical, I guess. But I think to me, what would be interesting would be to try and unwind the fantastical and see, well, how could that make sense here? And so that's kind of my view, how I see it. So that's like, I think that might set off some orange to red flags for some people in terms of their hopes for this vision of Batman. But don't worry, the way I love how Matt Reeves articulated that is that he didn't shut down any of the more fantastical sides. What I would say won't happen, if you're hoping for something like Man-Bat, that is not going to be adapted. I can't guarantee you that, but my confidence is through the roof. So if you hold my intuition to any kind of good metric, that should be saying something, I suppose, and especially given what Matt Reeves just said. But that's not to say that, as he said, I love the articulation. As he said, I think there's actually a grounded version of that story which could be really powerful and really great with Mr. Freeze. And Mr. Freeze's story is so, and can be adapted so powerful if you're familiar with the super traditionalist approach to why he does what he does for his wife. And yes, there is somewhat of a multifaceted aspect to his villainy, just like with a lot of villains. You know, I'm not trying to make it sound like Joker is fighting for the people kind of thing and society did it. It's not like that. And how Riddler, oh, society in Gotham is, you know, not really. It's that every villain's still born out of some kind of trauma in a way with what Matt Reeves is saying here, that it just shapes you. I mean, we're not all born evil. Like, things shape you. So with what Mr. Freeze's ambition is, can be explored in a grounded way. And the way Matt Reeves would do that is, I think, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not trying to be full of myself here. It's just I would love to see with what he's commenting here, it really does solidify the vision I've had for it. So I still say, like, he'll be working in GothCorp. Something like that will still happen that makes him have to somewhat exist in some kind of Sub-Zero-esque kind of temperature, perhaps. Or maybe he might ground it tonally even more, where it might not be kind of that Sub-Zero-esque kind of temperature, but he has to live within this suit. And because of what they're doing at GothCorp with certain tools, maybe with cold guns and things like that, he still uses that as a way of defending himself. It can get really layered like that, but as Matt Reeves said, in this iteration, obviously, I think it's very comics faithful, but it doesn't lean as hard into the fantastical. But I think to me, what would be interesting would be to try and unwind the fantastical and see, well, how could that make sense here? So what I've always said for Mr. Freeze to end this off on this quote is that I've always felt, without going too ham on the fantastical side, if you look up Russian cosmonaut suits, maybe I am putting in this video like I've done before, I feel like the early astronaut Russian cosmonaut suits could be really utilized in how that might be somewhat of a similar design for a GothCorp safety suit, like Mr. Freeze works there. They have to put that kind of hazmat-esque astronaut-looking cosmonaut suit on. It kind of mirrors that of the Mr. Freeze design we know and love, but as we know of this iteration of the Batman, the villains, even the heroes like Catwoman, or anti-heroes should I say, aren't quite where they're at in 5 years time kind of thing. I have no doubt that we'll get Selina in a Catwoman costume, but you know what I mean. So it won't be any different for characters and villains such as Mr. Freeze, and that will mean that he won't have a full-blown big bubble helmet kind of thing, but it could be done in the way that the Riddler has that kind of Zodiac mask get up. He still has the question mark, but it's not as theatrical in the massive suit and, you know, kind of Batman Zero-Year kind of look, if you know what I mean. You know what I'm trying to say. So with Mr. Freeze, it could be a Russian cosmonaut looking thing where he goes round in that, but through whatever incident or accident he has kind of thing, and through the efforts of trying to save his wife and this, that, and the other, and his absolute persistence in trying to resolve that situation, he's weaponized some of the technology at GothCorp, he's got a suit on, maybe Matt Reeves might not even do the Sub-Zero thing, and he just wears that suit to utilize a cold gun. Who knows how it could go. I do think it might split some fans, just in the same way as the Riddler though, because the Riddler wasn't done as super traditionalist as he is, but it doesn't make this iteration any less innovative and also accurate at the same time. With adaptations, it is precisely that, adapted from the source material. And I'm really not trying to come across patronizing it. I just mean, I love innovation. Otherwise, nothing will ever feel refreshed. I do agree with innovation, so much so can get to deviation eventually, but I don't feel like Matt Reeves would ever do that. As seen with the Riddler, it is still so purely in its fabric and DNA accurate, yet innovative, new, fresh. Same with Mr. Freeze, and chuck my idea in there of the Russian cosmonaut, astronaut suit-esque looking vibe. Obviously, don't take that like, oh, it's going to look like that. I'm just saying, if I was a concept artist, I'd be chucking ideas and photoshopping things like that and presenting it to Matt Reeves myself. Hey, Matt Reeves, hire me. I've got a billion ideas. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Alright, so up next, my thoughts on the comments from Pattinson and Reeves about Robin. So, Robert Pattinson opened up on whether he'd like to see a Robin added to the roster in a prospective, not confirmed, sequel to the Batman, but it's happening, I guarantee it. So yeah, but he has to be 13, the star said in response to the idea of Robin joining the fray. That's the only way I'll accept it. And he's like, no, I love Death in the Family and stuff, but I think it'd be so cool. Also, people are so scared of it, but it's kind of exciting. I think it would be a really fun addition. Now, before I give my thoughts, there are comments from Reeves, so I'll carry on here saying, he's referring, of course, to the infamous 1988 comic book storyline, which saw then Robin, Jason Todd, the second character to take up the persona, murdered at the hands of the Joker. At first, Matt Reeves joked that they wouldn't add a Robin to the franchise before conceding that he agreed with Pattinson. So this is where we have Matt Reeves saying, yeah, there's no way we won't do that. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, totally. I agree with that. The thing about doing a Batman movie is it's scary to do a Batman movie. Because first of all, there have been great ones. And also every single one of you has a vision of Batman in your head. And so we're competing with the vision that, I mean, one of the things I was doing when I was writing, I was walking down the street one day and I suddenly noticed, I was like, oh my God, Batman sweatshirt. Oh my God, Batman cap. You're literally, if you just notice it, I mean, I was talking to some round tables today. People have their Batman shirts on. Reeves notes that he too, like Pattinson, likes Death in the Family, further expanding that he likes the idea of, quote, approaching some of those stories and thinking, how can we do this in a way similar to what we read out with Freeze that feels fresh and grounded in a way. Look at that scary thing and see if there's a way to do it. The question, he says, is whether they'll be too scared. He concludes, quote, but I think we should try. So I do want to heavily stress, you can't take what Pattinson says with regards to when talking about Robin, yeah, but he has to be 13. That's the only way I'll accept it. That's what he said after that sentence, no, comma, I love Death in the Family. But like what he's trying to say there is like he would love that, but that's obviously not necessarily the decision that Matt Reeves will go for. Now that's not to say that they won't have a young Robin. On this channel and discussion series videos, I've been saying I don't think you're going to have a 10, 12-year-old Robin. In reality, they would, even if they do, by the way, go for a 13, 14-year-old in-universe Robin, the actor will still be 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, but quite a really young face-looking actor who's meant to be 13 to 15. I'm very confident, and I can't say this with conviction, but I do feel like Matt Reeves, first and foremost, he's saying that, yeah, like, there's no way we won't do that. Yeah, I'm kidding. I totally agree. I agree with all of that. He's saying it's scary. He's saying he would like to see how you can ground that in this universe. So, taking into account the fantastical elements, this is where I'm a bit split, because I feel like Reeves might view having a 13-year-old, it's not necessarily fantastical in the sense that, hey, is Venom and cryogenically somewhat frozen in a weird way Freeze and Clayface, you know, that's fantastical. A 13-year-old boy isn't. Do you know what I mean? But I think what he's saying, how do we adapt that? Is it realistic to have a kid in front of Pattinson? I know many of you will think that it is, and I'm not saying that it inherently isn't. I'm just trying to tune into what probably Reeves is saying here. All while he's saying that he agrees with it, I think he has some reservations like, okay, so Do we really go 13? No. Maybe we should say in the movie when he is brought in that he's 14 going on 15, 15 going on 16, really young looking in the face, but the actor is still 20. I highly doubt. I'm going to stick to my guns on this, and I'll hold my hands up if I'm wrong, and I'd be really excited either way to see what that's like, because that would still be so fascinating to actually tackle the kind of, if you really bring it into reality like Matt Reeves is doing here, not in the same way as Nolan, as I keep prefacing, but in its own way, what that would be like for Bruce Wayne, the one we're seeing as Pattinson in the movie, to bring in a in-universe age, maybe not the actor, who might be a bit older, but an in-universe 13, 14-year-old kid, teenager. That is interesting, and that could be done in the way like Kick-Ass does it, for example. Obviously not the same tonally, but you get what I'm saying there. But I do have a little bit of intuition here that Matt Reeves, I'm not saying he's going to go for a man Robin, for example, like Brenton Thwaites from Titans. I'm not saying that at all. I think they will go younger than that. But what I am saying is that I will still think that they're going to go for somebody who is 19, 20, who is meant to be aged down in universe to be 15, 16. I think I would believe that if the news came out. Like, it wouldn't remotely surprise me if the Robin that's in universe and given in a new interview with Matt Reeves is 16 years old. That would still be a very valid story to tell, because that's still a really young kid, basically a teenager, if they're 16 years old. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't think it has to absolutely go to 13, even though I know a lot of people think that's still just as relevant, and it is, but I'm just talking about realistic here. I think he will opt to go with 16 over someone like 13, but you never know. My thoughts are, like, either way, I'm down with it. I have absolute faith in Matt Reeves. Robin, as I said, I don't think will be included in the second film in the way that it will be a Batman and Robin duo, straight up. I think if they do that, it could be what I've repeated a lot of times in discussion series videos whenever Robin has come up in the Q&A posts that have been sent in. I wouldn't be surprised if Dick Grayson or the Flying Graysons thing happens towards the end of the second movie, where Bruce attends there with Alfred. Maybe it ends on like kind of a setup for how he looks at the kid who's crying just like he did in the midst of his parents' murder, and in the third movie he trains Robin. Maybe. I just don't know if that's going to happen in the second film. That's just my intuitive feeling with it, but we're going to have to wait and see. But it's still just really cool to hear this being discussed. Now, Matt Reeves has commented about the whole Batverse, because as a lot of people say, they want this to be more than a trilogy, like maybe 4, 5, 6 films. In my honest thoughts, I think it still will be a trilogy, but that doesn't mean it can't be expanded out in universe with HBO Max shows, even with people like Lieutenant James Gordon, who will obviously become commissioner at some point throughout the trilogy, featuring in these shows, even Pattinson himself. So he talks about all of this, the Penguin show, like a Batverse, and they say that while the Batman was conceived as a self-contained story and takes place outside Warner Bros. DCEU continuity, Reeves has already started dreaming of ways to expand this new world beyond the big screen. As previously announced, the Cloverfield director is executive producing 2 spin-offs in development at HBO Max, a drama about the Gotham City Police Department, which was announced in July 2020, and a series about the Penguin's rise to power. Reeves then says, "What I really wanted this movie to do is create a Batverse. You don't do a story and go, this is chapter 1, because you might not get to do chapter 2. So the story had to stand on its own. But the thing about it is that the Batworld is so rich with character that as you're starting to come to an end, you can already start thinking about the next thing, like he's probably done with this movie, because the idea, of course, is that Gotham's story never ends. According to Reeves, the Penguin show came out of discussions with HBO Max, which not only wanted shows about offshoot characters, but main ones too from the movie. I was thrilled by that," says Reeves. "I said to HBO Max, to be honest with you, the thing that was going to be the seeds of what I thought the next story could be in terms of the Penguin is that I saw there being this kind of American dream in Gotham sort of story, almost like Scarface, the rise of this character who we all know will achieve mythic status. He is underestimated and he's like a time bomb." They were all like, oh my god, we're in. And that was really exciting, because by that point, Colin had already given life to this character. And that's true. It's like what I was saying earlier with where the character's going to be in X amount of years' time compared to what the story is telling in this movie. We know where the Penguin will get traditionally, and Reeves is just giving more affirmation to that. How about we tell more of a rise to power with that, even though we're probably going to do a second and third movie? They were all like sold on it. So that's happening. So this is an interesting comment as well. While Reeves can't reveal which other characters they're thinking about doing shows about, Catwoman. Like, there's been rumors about that, and I'm heavily confident that that is a thing. He's looking forward to these projects because they'll be more character focused than you can even do in a feature, he says. He says, I love the idea of doing a story where you're really telling chapters of a character's life the way that The Sopranos did, right? There wasn't any one story that was Tony Sopranos. It was all one epic novel about his life, says Reeves. I think that, to me, is what's thrilling about long form, and the idea of being able to have created this version of the world in the Batman and then pull pieces off of that to do this kind of expansive storytelling. So really, that kind of is just an update on the Batverse, the HBO Max expansion there. We've been over this a lot in previous videos, but this is like a growing thing. It is going to continue to grow, and God, just you wait till the Batman comes out and the success is, you know, taken into account. We're going to be getting a lot more comments on this. And as always, guys, if you're still at this part in the video, I'm going to be covering this. So make sure you stay subscribed for updates on the HBO Max shows and the continued Reeves verse, if you will, or should I say Batverse. But there's one last thing I wanted to comment on. I'm going to issue a spoiler warning, so it has to do with Barry Keoghan's Joker. At the same time, this isn't me spoiling like exactly what happens or anything like that. It's got to do with the production notes of the movie, because they have somewhat been released, and the only thing I'm going to talk about for now is the cast, because in the production notes, and don't worry, I'm not talking about it just yet, they've got, you know, Robert Pattinson playing the Batman, Colin Farrell playing this, makeup for the movie, Colin Farrell prosthetics, but then it talks about Barry Keoghan's role. So I'm going to just quickly give my thoughts on this, and it's kind of as I've been saying. So here we go. He is described as an unseen Arkham prisoner, which is very, very interesting because it's basically what I've been kind of hinting at all along. And, you know, people didn't know for sure. His presence, as I've been trying to reassure a lot of people, wasn't going to ever be this stealing the thunder thing from the Riddler in the show. It's just going to be that world building. He's not going to be in it for long, whether that is towards the back half of the movie. Maybe they've shot some things that they've maybe there was going to be a scene with Batman talking to him, but maybe that's not going to be included now, and it's more just like as you see in this photo from earlier when we have Batman visiting Riddler, there's this unseen Arkham prisoner where maybe they did shoot him, but they've used some other footage instead where we might not see him properly, but we could hear the Joker's voice. It's interesting that they label him as an unseen Arkham prisoner, because I had a theory that, yes, I know a lot of people think it's Paul Dano's voice, even I do basically, but in some of the promos we hear that, and this is more just food for thought. I'm not saying this is the case, and it still probably is the Riddler's voice, but just trying to set up a picture for you in your head. When we get in some of those promos where we hear that voice of, I've always loved little riddles. A lot of people think that's Riddler, but for argument's sake, when we have Batman visit the Riddler, Edward Nashton, in Arkham State Hospital, in one of the other rooms is this unseen Arkham prisoner, Barry Keoghan's John Doe Joker. Obviously, at a very early stage, he's not the Joker, Clown Prince of Crime, as Gotham knows him to be. The dance even hasn't quite started yet between him and Batman. But when he's talking to the Riddler, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know this, by the way, but I wouldn't be surprised. What if that line, and some people are like, why would they put that in the promo, but you would be surprised. And again, I do want to stress, I'm not saying this is it. I'm just entertaining the idea. But just to build a theory here, like you could say the only reference we get, because they may have changed their mind from actually showing him and they just used some alternate kind of ideas they had through maybe hence the unseen prisoner title in the production notes for Barry Keoghan. They just used dialogue. So as Bruce is walking out of the Arkham State Hospital, you see those other doors in the background? He might just simply say something as simple as the line as, I've always loved little riddles. And he just laughs a little bit because he overheard Riddler giving riddles to Batman, and that's just like John Doe's commentary on that. It would be playful, it would be an Easter egg that speaks to what a lot of people would be like, wait, who said, I think I know who said that. We don't see him, hence unseen Arkham prisoner played by Barry. He's still the Joker to be the Clown Prince of Crime in a few years' time-esque kind of thing, but for now it's nothing more than a line. And again, I'm not saying it's that line, but what I am saying, even if it's something different, it could just be a line and Batman just pauses before he goes out and just goes like that and then just carries on walking. That's it. Could be something as simple as that. But I am telling you, I think they did 100% shoot, if we don't see him, an actual shot of Barry. But if the description of unseen Arkham prisoner is true, they might have decided to go against actually showing him. This could be for a variety of reasons, by the way, because even though they would have done prosthetics and things like that, they may have been like, actually, we're not finally decided on what he looks like here, so for now, we're still going to tease him, still get Barry to say some lines, but what we're going to do instead is, because we haven't fully decided on the makeup until when we want to bring him in properly, we're actually going to hold off on showing the makeup we did do and just do it with a line. That makes complete sense to me. I guarantee there has been some shuffling around with what they've wanted to do with Barry's Joker in some way, shape, or form. That could even be different to what some people have seen in the test screenings. You get my drift there. So we still might see him, even though he's been described as unseen Arkham prisoner, just in a very ambiguous way, akin to that of what we've seen with Edward in the trailers, where the light is on his face. It could be something like that, but if we are taking it strictly, unseen Arkham prisoner could just be the voice, and it could be a line like from some of the promos that you might be hearing right now.
I've always loved little riddles.
And that would be like everyone, even if it isn't that line, and that was Paul Dano's Riddler, just for argument's sake, everyone is like, I think I know who that was. Oh my god. I think it'd be a shame to not see him, but again, would totally understand why they didn't want to commit to actually showing the scene they shot with filming his face, for reasons like makeup and all kinds of other things like that. But I think that's where I'm going to end this video, guys. It has been a long one once again, so I'd really appreciate a like on this one. Would appreciate you subscribing if you've been here throughout. Got some very exciting stuff happening in the next week or so. Can't wait to get to that. And guys, I think that's it. I think I'm going to leave it there. So follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Twitter is my main place where I talk, but also I have a Discord server. But I'm going to love you and leave you now, guys. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.